We did it! She's not breathing.
Let's go! Our plan worked. Now we'll get the insurance money for sure. Can't forget the inheritance either.
Despite the fact that they downright hit me with their car, these two people were having this genuinely terrifying conversation, and they left me to die on the cold, wet asphalt. I was dazed, and I felt my life force fluctuating dangerously. I couldn't move, even a single muscle. But I suppose the sheer fury I was feeling at those people for leaving me to my fate allowed me to remain conscious. That man's voice. That was unmistakably my husband. I couldn't let myself die like this without getting back at him for what he did to me. I eventually ran out of strength, blacked out, and woke up after only the sky knows how long, and I found myself lying upon a hospital bed. My husband was lying on another hospital bed right next to me for some reason, and his body was covered in bandages. This is the story of how a family tragedy eventually gave way to a series of incidents that put my life in jeopardy multiple times, and how I was able to retaliate well against the perpetrators, thanks to my children. My name is Janet Gomerson, and I'm a 46-year-old part-time housewife. I used to live with my husband Austin, who is 4 years older than me. We have 2 children, a daughter, Vienna, and a son, Corey. Both of them are already married and have families on their own. Austin is the president of his own business, and I hold the status of a wife of such a figure, which is a status I am genuinely grateful for. But I was not interested in any luxurious lifestyle and wanted to work myself too, so I got a part-time job at a coffee shop. Our life as a family was smooth sailing, and I was able to raise my children and work my job well without any problems. My husband's life was centered on his work, and we didn't have much time together as a couple or a whole family. But I accepted that this was to be expected when a husband holds such a prestigious position of responsibility as president of a business. One day, while these peaceful days were continuing, I received news that my father became very ill and was now being hospitalized. My father lived 2 stations away, on the outskirts of town with my younger brother, Brendan, and his wife. He worked all his life as a teacher at a public high school and had been working as a reappointed temporary teacher since his retirement 5 years prior. The hospital where my father was hospitalized was close to my house, and Brendan had his work, his wife, and his 2-year-old son to worry about and couldn't be burdened to go there to take care of Dad. So I decided I would take care of him while he was in the hospital. Mom had already tragically died of breast cancer when I was 7 and when Brendan was only 3, and I was devastated by his serious illness. The fact that he hadn't remarried after Mom passed and had raised us both with his own hands is utterly insane. And to see him suffer after 25 years of restless toil for his 2 children just broke my heart. His children were now independent, and I had hoped for Dad to retire comfortably, but reality wasn't so forgiving, it seemed. His illness progressed quickly, and 3 months after he was admitted to the hospital, he drew his final breath. When I went to see him in the hospital for the last time, his eyes were twinkling so brightly as he said,
Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't be lonely where I'm going, because your mother's been waiting for me for 35 years. It's time we were together again.
I swear, I've never cried so much in my life. My face was in actual pain from all the crying. And he left with a smile on his face a mere hour after he uttered those words, and I'm only happy he was able to rest with his 2 children there with him. The funeral was scheduled to be a small affair, but his old students and colleagues came to the memorial service, which got me emotional once again. Brendan did well in his examinations to become a doctor, and Dad's smiling face in the portrait seemed to be praising him for all the hard work that he did. It must have been especially hard for my brother, because he pretty much knew exactly what it was that Dad was battling during his time in the hospital. Doctors diagnosed him with drug-resistant tuberculosis, and with his age, it was hopeless, and Brendan knew it better than most people. After the burial, Austin drove me home. He comforted me as I was feeling down in the dumps.
Your father was a great teacher. Look at how many old students of his came to say goodbye. Everyone was so sad to see him go.
He always worked so hard at his job and raising his children. I can't believe he's gone so suddenly.
Yeah, well, welcome to reality, where unfairness and cruelty are mandatory rules. I know this is a bad time to bring this up, but I've got a 3-day business trip. You gonna be okay on your own?
Thanks for looking out for me. I'll be fine if it's just for 3 days. I've still got the 6th day to take care of, and other memorial services to keep me busy and distracted.
I'll try to get out of work for the memorial services as much as possible.
Austin's work had gotten even busier lately, and he's been taking more and more sudden onset business trips. Sometimes he would go directly from the office to his destination, and sometimes it was so hectic that his personal secretary would come to the house to pick up his belongings. Once I came home from my job and was surprised to see the secretary lady coming out of the house. At that time, the secretary said to me, "I heard that you were at work, Mrs. Coverson, so Mr. Austin has asked me to pick up some important document that he had forgotten." Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the trouble my husband has caused you. Wouldn't it be better as his wife to stay at home full-time and take care of him instead of working? Oh, well, that's... Thank you for everything. I had no choice but to thank her right then, but I noticed that she seemed to be in a pretty bad mood. I was worried that she might not think well of her boss, who asked her to run a personal errand like this. So I called Austin to tell him what happened. "Hey, Austin, it's not customary for you as their president to ask them to run personal errands for you. Just call me and I'll take care of it next time you want something done, honey. Okay?"
I guess I did do something wrong there. You being at your job and all. I'll do that next time.
Sometime later, after the 49th day for my father, the will regarding the inheritance was opened in the presence of 2 lawyers. Brendan was also present, of course. My father was a teacher and had modest retirement savings, but Mom, who'd passed away long before he did, was the only daughter of a wealthy family and had inherited quite a large legacy. The contents of Dad's will stipulated that Brendan and I were to receive the inheritance, which hadn't been touched since Mom's death, fairly, and that the remainder of his retirement savings was to be donated to a scholarship fund for children of parentless children. My brother and I agreed to the contents of the will, which was just as we imagined our father would write, and decided to leave everything to the lawyers. My husband, who has also witnessed the disclosure of the will, was surprised because he had no idea that my mother, who had passed away long before our marriage, had been a wealthy woman. A few days later, I was home alone. I still had 3 days before my husband returned from his business trip. I had been busy nursing my father during his stay at the hospital. But at this time, without having anyone to take care of, life seemed to be pointless to me, and I felt completely dejected. That day, memories of my father kept popping into my mind, and before I knew it, it was already nighttime. By that point, I was feeling a bit hungry, so I put the kettle on to make myself a cup of tea. I thought about what to eat, but I didn't feel like cooking for myself, so I decided to buy something from a nearby diner. It was so late at night that the only stores open were convenience stores and diners. I went outside and started to walk in the direction of the diner at a leisurely pace. It had been raining earlier and the sidewalk was wet. My bare feet in sandals got soaked, dirty and cold every time they took a step. After a few minutes, I arrived at the diner and began to choose my dinner, being careful not to slip on my wet sandals. As I wandered around the snack and beverages section with its brightly lit displays, shelves and light, bossa nova music playing, I passed several shoppers as I chose my dinner. As the seconds turned into minutes, my foggy thoughts gradually became clearer and clearer. Suddenly, an important memory shot across my mind like an electric shock. It was the scene of myself putting the kettle on the fire at home. I couldn't help but shout, "Oh, I'm so stupid!" Yes, indeed, I had unwillingly left the stove on. I hurriedly finished buying my dinner and left the diner and headed for home. The water in the kettle must have been boiling well by now. Had the water spilled over the sides of the kettle, extinguishing the stove and leaving it gassing? Had the kettle heated up and caught on fire and most of the water evaporated away? Very concerning questions crossed my mind one after the other. And the very first thing I thought to do was call the gas company to turn off the gas. I kept walking, looking at my phone screen to make a call. And that's why I didn't notice a car approaching me at a high rate of speed. The car had no lights on, so I couldn't see anything at the moment I felt the impact. My body became weightless for a total of 2 seconds, and then it hit the ground. The pain was so intense, I had the wind knocked out of me. I stopped breathing as a result. I rolled onto my face, and through my blurred vision, I could see the tires of a car stopping a little away on the wet road. I saw 2 figures getting out of the car and running towards me, evidently panicking. I was beginning to feel faint, but I was relieved to think that I was going to be rescued. But then I heard the most horrifying conversation between a man and a woman. We did it! She's not breathing!
Let's go! Our plan worked! Now we'll get the insurance money for sure. Can't forget the inheritance either.
Now, I need you to get back to your house as fast as you can. I'll take up the car.
Got it. Hey, don't leave anything in the car, alright?
I know. You can take my bag. And with that conversation, they left me to die on the cold, wet asphalt. I couldn't believe I was hearing the sound of the car driving away as I noticed the roadside lights dimming. My breathing was becoming noticeably shallow. I was dazed. I felt my life force fluctuating dangerously. I couldn't move even a single muscle, but I suppose the sheer fury I was feeling at those people for leaving me to my fate alone to remain conscious. That man's voice, that was unmistakably my husband. I couldn't let myself die like this without getting back at him for what he did to me. But there was no one to find me lying there in the dark night, unable to call for help, while I was terrified by the cold feeling of foreboding. I heard a faint voice on my phone that seemed to be on a call. "Over my dead body. You'll get away with this, you bastard. We're sorry. We didn't catch how you would like us to help you out today. Please be patient as we connect you to one of our operators. This is Jessica, one of the customer center speaking. How may I help you today?" I took the biggest breath I could, and I shouted with all my might into the screen of my phone, which was hanging on the holder around my neck. "Help! Please! I need an ambulance!" "Please do not hang up the phone. We will connect you to the emergency services." Almost immediately afterwards came the voice from a fire department operator on my phone. I responded breathlessly and lost consciousness. I came to lying upon a hospital bed. When I woke up the first time, I felt like I was better off dead, to be perfectly quite frank. My head was spinning. My vision showed ambiguous hallucinations, and I was feeling violently nauseous. But the contents of my stomach seemed to be flowing out through a tube. My throat sore and aching back was so painful it caused tears to well up in my eyes. Mom, you're awake. Are you okay?
Mom!
I heard the familiar voices of my children. I felt a tsunami of relief that I had survived. But hang on, I wonder what happened to Austin and that woman. After they left me for dead in the middle of the road, they must have felt like their places in society were in danger, since I was still alive and thus still had the chance to retaliate. And I had left the stove on. What had happened to the house? I strained my voice through my excruciatingly painful throat. What about the house? The gas? My children looked at each other as I asked these questions. They chose their words carefully as they told me, as I had feared. Their house had been destroyed by a fire, but my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip, was at home for some reason when the fire broke out. He was rescued, but was seriously injured, they said. At about the same time, they received word that I had been involved in an accident and was undergoing emergency surgery. The poor dears rushed to the hospital, panicked out of their minds, because both of their parents' mishaps. I responded, Austin? Seriously injured? A fire? I suddenly burst out laughing, and both Vienna and Corey were stunned. Austin had apparently been taken to the same hospital as me, and my family wanted him to sleep next to my bed. My in-laws were there sitting next to him, watching over him in his coma, and they heard me laughing. They came over to me with surprised expression on their faces. Mrs. Gomerson said, "What's wrong? Have you lost your mind, Janet?" Mr. Gomerson went to reproach me.
Austin is too injured to speak. What the hell are you laughing at?
My parents-in-law were furious for some stupid reason, but my children defended me, saying that I was still seriously injured too, and they also referred to the bandages on my head and my neck. My in-laws were convinced that I must have been in a state of shock, apologized for reproaching me, and they called the doctor. The doctor gave me a sedative because I was getting increasingly agitated. I fell asleep again. In my sleep, I had a dream. Dad appeared, and he looked like he was around 30 years old, and I was staring at him as though I was 5 years old. He was trying to nudge me awake in the morning, as he usually did when I was younger, telling me I was going to be late when I didn't wake up. My father was taking care of me like a mother, but I was so sleepy that I wanted him to let me sleep longer. Then, out of the blue, his smile morphed away into an expressionless visage, and suddenly shouted with a furious voice, but still with that eerie, straight face.
Wake up, Janet. Now!
I jerked awake in my hospital bed and saw a familiar woman standing in front of me. I recognized her as my husband's secretary at work. She was clutching a syringe, evidently trying to put something into my IV. I quickly pulled out the tubes from my arm and slammed on the nurse's call. "Stop! Someone help!" And my cries of help, my husband's secretary turned and tried to run for the door, but the hurrying nurse coming into the room slammed into her, causing her to drop the syringe, and the glass shattered on the floor. There was a great commotion as the nurse screamed for backup and the multiple doctors rushed in to examine me. Others tried to subdue the woman. I was then moved to a private room in the ICU, where no one was allowed to see me, not even my children, and I was interviewed by the police. I testified as much as I could remember about the circumstances surrounding my incident, and my claims deemed to be a victim of the incident, and a police escort was provided for me while I was hospitalized for protection in case Austin and his secretary whose name turned out to be Harriet, had other cohorts in on bringing harm, or worse, to me. Eventually, the bruises and cuts on my lower back healed, and my broken collarbone was expected to heal completely if I rested well. So I was moved to a larger room and a police escort removed. Safety was pretty much ensured for me because at this point, the perpetrators, Austin and Harriet, with whom she was having an affair, by the way, were arrested. Brendan, who came to see me, told me what happened to them while I was under police protection in my private ICU room. First of all, when I jerked awake when I had that dream about Dad, Harriet had broken into my hospital room, saying she had some business to attend with Austin. He was his boss after all, and anyone could justify her going to him in a matter of business, and attempted to harm me in the bed next to mine. A medical examination of the contents of the syringe revealed the presence of an extremely high concentration of a drug called dextromethorphan, which is found in the over-the-counter cough and cold medicines like Nyquil or Tylenol cold. At recommended doses, it may be used safely and effectively, but it's also become a drug of abuse. Intentional misuse at high doses can result in psychotic symptoms, including paranoia, delusions, and hallucinations. Without immediate treatment, can kill you. Harriet was taken into custody for attempted bodily injury by police after a report from the hospital staff, but Austin, who was still at large for causing the vehicular accident, was seriously injured by a burn on his throat. Although he was unable to breathe well or speak for a while, he fully recovered before I did and was allowed to leave the hospital and was arrested as soon as he was discharged. He insisted that my testimony was bullshit because it lacked evidence of that happening, but the police had already obtained evidence from a very unexpected source. It was a recording of a customer service call that I had made to the gas company's customer center just before the accident. The operator who had connected me to the emergency call had recorded the conversation, which confirmed what I had testified. The car that supposedly hit me was also found to be stolen, thanks to the video evidence from a security camera at the diner, and a group of car hustlers that provide such suspicious cars for a fee had been caught. Evidence of Austin and Harriet conspiring with this gang was discovered as well. As for the fire at the house, the kitchen burned the most, so it was probably caused by my mismanagement of the day recardling the kettle, and Austin just simply caught in the fire. The house burned to the ground, but among the surviving items was partially damaged handbag containing Harriet's company employee ID card, and that alone provided tangible evidence of the relationship between her and my husband. Brendan said that he was heartbroken that I had just lost Dad not too long before this atrocious disaster, and that my children came to visit me as soon as I was released from the police protection, angry and saddened by their father's misdeeds. Eventually, after I had fully recovered, I was released from the hospital and moved into a rented apartment that Brendan had been so kind to arrange for me. My in-laws visited me, apologized wholeheartedly for everything their son had done, and offered to pay compensation and cover all the costs of the procedure. According to my in-laws, Austin had been having an affair with his secretary for some while now, but she started pressuring him more and more mercilessly into marrying him, and that got him thinking about a way to divorce me without paying any alimony. The horrible plan was that he resorted to, and look where that got me and his children. They also said that my recent inheritance of a huge amount of money was also trigger for them to carry out the plan. He saw it as a chance to get both the insurance money after my death and the woman who he is cheating on me with. However, my leaving the house with a kettle on the stove, something that under normal circumstances would have been catastrophic in any case, that should have never happened, accidentally saved my life and exposed my husband's wrongdoings. And the reason my husband came home on a business trip is apparently to create an alibi, as he planned to answer the house phone when the news of my accident came in. The business trip was supposed to last 3 days, but he had finished his work in 24 hours and was going to spend the other 2 days with the unfaithful woman. His lawyer told me that's how he came up with the plan and how he put it into action. I found out during my hospital stay that my husband had insured me for a huge amount of money, which thankfully covered all my hospital expenses. My lawyer arranged with my parents-in-law a divorce from my husband in prison, which was subsequently obtained quite smoothly. I also went and filed a claim for $120 in alimony and compensation. Austin, at the pressuring of my parents-in-law, got rid of all his property and savings, paid me in a lump sum. I had no intention of ever forgiving Harriet either. She had tried to kill me twice. After all, I demanded $50,000 in alimony and another $40,000 in compensation for attempting to inflict intentional injury to me. I don't know if she had the ability to pay such a huge amount of money, but I'm going to have her pay even if I have to seize a lot of her personal property. Henceforth, I have zero intention of ever having anything to do with my ex-husband ever again. But I do feel sorry for my children, who now have a father with a criminal record. My own physical wounds have healed, but my emotional wounds still run deep. So, I'm going to take time off work and go on a long trip across Canada. Perhaps, but I haven't even decided on where to go just yet. But I'm going to settle for Canada or Europe. It seems that I was alive, thanks to the most miraculous of miracles, but I still think that I was protected by something, or someone. Even after all this time, Dad's call to wake the hell up that afternoon saved my life. Now that I fully realize, Dad had protected my life as much as he could, perhaps even from beyond grave. I will cherish this life as much as I can, and not just my life, Brendan's, Vienna's, Corey's, everyone I hold dear. I will treasure, and I hope to make more memories with them for years to come.